Welcome back. This is a series of videos on C.S. Lewis's view of natural law as described in the Abolition of Man and how it connects to his Chronicles of Narnia. So, again, I'm not a Lewis scholar. I'm not an expert on Lewis's life or his dogs. So I have to tell the story. So I was at this academic conference once, and these two scholars of Lewis got in an argument about C.S. Lewis's dog. Apparently, one of the people in the audience in the discussion for some other paper, not my paper, but another paper, got in an argument. One of them referred to C.S. Lewis's dog. I don't even remember his name, Fido or something. And someone else in the audience said, no, that was Lewis's first dog. His second dog, Fifi, whatever that dog's name was. That you're talking about Fifi, not Fido. And they got in this big debate about C.S. Lewis's dogs. I didn't even know C.S. Lewis had a dog, but, okay. So anyway, I'm not going to go into that kind of fanboy stuff on Lewis. I am a fan of the Chronicles of Narnia, but not necessarily of Lewis's dogs, or dogs, or however many he had. But I have done some thinking about Lewis's Abolition of Man, and in Lewis's Abolition of Man, Lewis talks about what he calls the doctrine of objective value, which he says is the doctrine that it's a belief. The doctrine of objective value, this is quoting from the Abolition, the doctrine of objective value is the belief that certain attitudes are really true and others really false. So the kind of thing the universe is and the kinds of things we are. Now Lewis calls that the Tao. He uses the term Tao as shorthand to refer to the doctrine of objective value. And I think it's probably uses the term Tao because it's easier to say than the doctrine of objective value. It's just one syllable. But he also uses to show that the doctrine of objective value applies everywhere, not just in England in the early part of the 20th century, but or to Europe or to Christendom. It applies everywhere to all human beings, all rational beings, at all times in the universe. So the interesting thing, though, is the way in which Lewis connects the doctrine of objective value, what he calls the Tao, to the Chronicles of Narnia. So in this video, I want to continue thinking about that, maybe get to some examples. But what's kind of interesting is wondering, again, why... Oh, by the way, this discussion is coming from a paper that I wrote for a book called The Chronicles of Narnia and Philosophy, edited by Greg Bassam and Jerry Walls. Came out about 20 years ago, in the early 2005, maybe? 20 years ago, roughly, from the time of this video recording. My paper's on the Tao in Narnia, or the natural law of Narnia. So one of the things that's kind of funny is why, or can we call natural law and Tao the same thing? In other words, Aquinas, talks about natural law, and Lewis calls it Tao. And what's kind of strange is here's an Asian idea, Tao, connected with a medieval Catholic philosopher like Aquinas, the concept of natural law. So the Tao of Narnia is not, of course, Taoism, and Lewis wasn't a Taoist, and neither is anyone in the Chronicles, as far as I can tell. Taoism, or Taoism, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm not sure anybody does. I have to ask a native Chinese speaker, maybe. Is a Chinese religion or philosophy that sees ultimate reality as an infinite, inexpressible principle that underlies and flows through all things and can only be felt or intuited rather than grasp the rational concepts. Now, I think that's partly okay with Aquinas' natural law. I don't think if you mean by flows through all things, it sounds more like a force. I'm not an expert on the philosophy of the force in the Star Wars universe, but good grief. Aquinas certainly thought that we can grasp through rational concepts natural law. And so I don't think Lewis is a Taoist in this sense. If that's what Taoism is. Lewis, I don't think, accepted that. But it might, the natural law is maybe beyond, that is, there's more to it than what we grasp by reason, because it flows from the heart of God, or the essence of God. But it is certainly graspable by rational means. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to know it by proof. Some things that are known without proof are certainly known by rational means. Okay, So the Tao, as Lewis conceives it, is present in Taoism, but it's not exclusive to it or any other religion. The Tao that Lewis refers to is something to which even religious practices and creeds must conform. The term isn't used simply for shorthand. It's used because of its inclusiveness. Natural law is simply present in the entire world, the entire cosmos, written on our hearts. It's the law written on our hearts. So a nice way to look at this inclusiveness of natural law, or the doctrine of objective value that Lewis calls for shorthand, the Tao, is the way in which Lewis connects it in the Abolition, in the appendix of that book. And there, Lewis kind of gives a little mini catalog of illustrations of the Tao to show the commonality of belief in objective values across religions, cultures, times, places, people groups, languages. I mean, you pick any time, any language, any culture, any system of laws, whatever it is, from the Hindu, Babylonian, Indian, Chinese, Viking, Native American, European, Pacific Islander, you pick. Lewis just kind of rattles off in the appendix all these illustrations of it. Again, he makes clear that it's not a proof for them. It's not an abductive or an inductive proof. It's an illustration. It's simply to show that, look, people believe the doctrine of objective value, the Tao, throughout history and time. In other words, it's not an exclusively Christian thing or Judeo-Christian thing or monotheistic thing. It's a human thing. It's a natural thing. It's part of the warp and woof, the fabric of reality. Okay. So there's common agreement, for example, that general kindness is morally praiseworthy across various traditions. This, of course, doesn't prove that there's really objective value, but it does show the concept of objective value is present across culture, time, religion, and race. So in the Chronicles, then, I'm going to use specific examples of Lewis's illustrations of the Tao from the appendix of the Abolition of Man to show the concept of objective value central to his works in the Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, so let's look at maybe an example of this. Okay, so one of the things that's kind of interesting, both in the Chronicles, less so in the Abolition of Man, but Lewis does it in a negative way by showing the rejection of the objective value leads to absurdities. He does that in chapter 1 of the Abolition of Man. But Lewis doesn't argue for the Tao in the Chronicles. It's not like the Chronicles is like this philosophical treatise, but he illustrates it. Right? He shows it in the characters. He illustrates that there really are natural moral laws that apply to us readers and fans of the Chronicles and the characters that occur there. And there's really only 3 possible responses that we can have to the claim that natural law is real, Tao is real. We can accept it in whole, right? In other words, we can accept it as it is. We can accept the doctrine of objective value. We can accept natural law. We can accept it in part and reject it in part. In other words, we can pick and choose which parts of the natural law we want to apply and reject, or we can reject it entirely. Now, Lewis, what he does is he discusses these responses in detail in the Abolition of Man. So chapter 2 of the Abolition of Man is the partial acceptance, partial rejection of natural law, and chapter 3 is rejecting it entirely. Okay, so if you want to read through that, you'll see his arguments there, rational arguments he gives for it. But the responses are also illustrated by various characters throughout the Chronicles. Okay, so each of these responses, accept natural law entirety, reject it in part, accept it in part, or reject it entirely. He shows all 3 of those responses in the Chronicles of Narnia. It's really interesting to see, and we can pick maybe the first example from his main characters. So the first option of accepting natural law, the doctrine of objective value, the Tao as a whole, and to try and live by it, that's illustrated, in my view, by the Narnian heroes. Peter, Lucy, Edmund, Emmett, for example, Reepicheep, to name a few. To accept the Tao involves 3 things. So to accept the doctrine of objective value involves 3 things. 1, it involves a commitment to an objective moral order that's independent of what I think. Right? In other words, I look at natural law like I look at physical laws of gravity, like I can't change them. Maybe I can learn to fly and counteract gravity through air travel or something, but I don't reject the existence of gravity. I simply adapt to it, conform myself to it. Okay. 2. So it involves 1, recognizing the objectivity of value and its independence of me. 2, an openness to moral development within the reality of the doctrine of objective value. So in other words, I should recognize that my moral my moral knowledge and my moral character can develop, it can improve, given my knowledge of the objectivity of value. 3, a willingness to follow the doctrine of objective value, the Tao, in all situations, not just those that are easy or convenient. So for an example, and finally get to an example here from Chronicles. Take Peter from Chronicles of Narnia. From the beginning, but with a few minor lapses, Peter, the High King of Narnia, did what was right because he saw it was right. He obeyed the commands given by Aslan. He was willing to learn how to be good and righteous leader. He was willing to do this in every area of his life. This acceptance of natural law led to the possibility of a good life and allowed him to be a good person. Maybe, and I think clearly Lewis claims this, for eternity. The participation of Peter's soul in the natural law, in the doctrine of objective value, ultimately connected in Narnian terms to Aslan and his father, the emperor, in Christian terms to Christ and Father and Holy Spirit. That's itself what makes the soul more real, more permanent, and more eternal, suitable for life in the real Narnia. In other words, I'm only suited for eternal life if my soul is conformed to that which is most real. Again, that occurs both in the natural law, but also connected to God himself, to Christ himself, in the Christian vision, of which Narnia is a hint or a pointer. Okay, so I think maybe we'll leave off there, and I'll do another video which tries to show some other possible responses to the doctrine of objective value. Those are responding to by accepting it in part and rejecting it in part, or rejecting it in whole. Okay, that's what we're doing. All right, thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.